For more than 75 years, Europe's stability did not rest on its own strength. It rested on one guarantee: protection from the United States. Under NATO's shield, major wars were deterred. Europe built prosperity instead of preparing for conflict. Welfare expanded. Industries grew. A generation believed large-scale war on the continent was over. But for the first time since World War II, that guarantee no longer feels unquestioned. Not because NATO has collapsed, but because priorities are shifting. Power is moving. Washington is looking elsewhere. A crisis in Greenland. Political pressure. A strategic pivot toward Asia. Individually, manageable. Together, a warning. If the security foundation beneath Europe begins to move, what's at stake is not just Europe's future, but the balance of power across the Western world. When World War II ended, Europe stood in ruins. Its economy shattered. Its militaries exhausted. Trust between nations broken. Out of that collapse, a new security system emerged: NATO. Inside that alliance, the United States took on a role no one else could fully replace. It provided the nuclear umbrella, global force projection, strategic intelligence networks, and deterrence against powers like Russia. This was not just an alliance. It became the foundation of post-1945 European stability. For decades, that system allowed European nations to do something rare in their history: scale back military power and redirect resources toward economic integration, social welfare, and political reconstruction. While America strengthened its global position through a tight Atlantic network, Europe enjoyed stability that created space for prosperity. The relationship was not one-sided, but it was not symmetrical. And that imbalance was accepted as the price of security. Over time, dependence stopped being temporary. It became structural. Surveys from YouGov show that between 63% and 78% of Western Europeans still believe their peace and defense rely on the United States. That is not just public sentiment. It reflects a strategic reality built over more than 7 decades. For years, many European leaders treated their alliance with the United States as nearly permanent. Policy disputes came and went, but the strategic alignment was assumed to hold. Washington and Europe's capitals argued, then returned to the same commitment: defend Atlantic stability through NATO. That assumption began to crack under President Donald Trump. Pressure intensified. Trade tariffs. Demands for higher defense spending. Sharper geopolitical signals. Europe responded with a familiar strategy: compromise. Military budgets increased. Economic cooperation expanded. Deals were announced so Washington could claim political wins. The logic was simple: protect the relationship, avoid escalation. But the crisis over Greenland exposed the limits of that approach. Greenland is an autonomous territory of Denmark and part of NATO's security architecture. When serious interest emerged from Washington about acquiring it, Europe offered almost everything except sovereignty. Expanded NATO presence. More American troops. Investment partnerships. Resource cooperation. Yet for the first time, concessions did not automatically ease tensions. And this is where the realization took hold. Even the closest ally could now become an unexpected source of strategic pressure. The crisis in Greenland forced Europe to confront a reality it had long avoided. It does not have the leverage to force the United States to change its strategic direction. For decades, that imbalance was accepted. America served as the central pillar of Western security. Europe built prosperity beneath that shield. But once interests began to shift, the asymmetry became impossible to ignore. The relationship depended on America's capacity to lead and Europe's limited ability to stand alone. Inside Europe, the tone began to change. Leaders now speak about rearming, expanding defense industries, deepening political coordination within the European Union. But behind those plans lies a quiet understanding. Strategic power takes decades to build. Geopolitical pressure unfolds now. Public opinion may grow more critical of Washington. The strategic reality has not changed. Europe still depends on the same security system that has protected it since 1945. This is the real turning point. For the first time in generations, Europe is not only questioning its rivals but the reliability of its closest ally. Yet it also understands its limits. Direct confrontation with the United States is not realistic. Dependence built over half a century cannot be erased in a single crisis. And so Europe faces a question it has never truly had to answer. Not how to preserve the alliance, but how to survive if that alliance one day transforms. Today, Europe stands at a crossroads that will shape its future. For more than half a century, the continent's stability never stood alone. It was tied directly to the power and commitment of the United States. Now something has shifted. More European leaders and voters speak openly about strategic autonomy, an idea that once sounded unrealistic, but now feels necessary. Not because they want to end the alliance, but because they are no longer certain it will always look the same. This is the dilemma. Europe wants greater independence. Yet its security systems, intelligence networks, and deterrence structure remain deeply integrated with America, largely through NATO. For decades, that arrangement allowed Europe to avoid the full cost of being a global military power. It built one of the world's largest economies. It expanded welfare systems. It preserved internal stability. Breaking that dependence is not a simple political decision. It is a structural transformation that could take a generation. The transatlantic alliance has not collapsed. NATO still stands. Military cooperation continues. But the mindset has changed. For the first time since 1945, Europe is no longer planning for a world where American protection is guaranteed. It is beginning to prepare for a world where stability is no longer given, but must be built on its own. For decades, the alliance between Europe and the United States was more than a partnership. It was the foundation of Western stability. It deterred major wars. It preserved the balance of power. It allowed an entire generation to live without large-scale conflict on their own continent. But today, for the first time, that foundation no longer feels unshakable. The question is no longer whether the alliance will suddenly collapse. The real question is this: is the world entering an era in which Europe must learn to stand on its own? And is America still willing to carry the same burden it has shouldered for the past 75 years?